Ozempic.
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 It's one of the biggest weight loss trends currently on the market.
You can just make people who've struggled with their weight their entire lives thin. It's a miracle. It's too good to be true.
Right here, this is the cure-all. This is the thing. It's gonna make you lose weight. It's gonna make you fit in. Everybody's doing it. It's safe. It's fun.
Demand for the drug has made it both pricey and hard to find, so no surprise, some people are selling Ozempic and knockoffs on the black market.
That is when the anxiety started. I will be honest with you, and I am so truthful when I say that Ozempic almost took my life.
Obesity is a rising problem across the world. Deep down, we all want to be healthy, look good, and feel good. So the idea of a once-a-week injection that can help you lose weight and make your life better is tempting.
In your stomach, you take it, go like that, press, that's it.
It's being sold under different names by different manufacturers and is being made out to be a miracle drug for weight loss. It's all over social media, there are shortages all across the world, and I can't help but think that we're not talking about the side effects enough. So I had to find out why. This might be the first time we are experiencing a frenzy like this around a weight loss drug, but this isn't the first time a cure to obesity has hit the market. The 1930s. During World War I, people noticed that workers in munition factories that came in contact with dinitrophenol, a compound being used in explosives, lost a lot of weight. So of course, it was later rebranded and sold as a weight loss drug in America. Eventually, we found out that high doses of the drug had terrible side effects, like blindness, neuropathy, and even death in some cases. So in 1938, the FDA banned the drug for human consumption. Then, in the 1940s, Benzedrine, an amphetamine, now also known as speed, was being used by soldiers in World War II to stay awake and focus for long periods of time. Countries like the US, UK, Germany, and Japan placed massive orders of the drug for their armies. But once the war ended, obviously the manufacturers needed new customers, so they moved their focus to housewives in America and sold it as a weight loss drug. Then in the 60s, methamphetamines were approved by the FDA to treat obesity. The use of amphetamines for weight loss was later banned in 1965. These are just a few in a long list of weight loss drugs we've seen over the decades. And now in the 2020s, we have Ozempic. I don't think Ozempic is at all the same thing as giving people meth or speed for weight loss. But we have a history of jumping the gun and selling drugs to people without understanding the extent of the side effects in the long run. And in some cases, despite knowing the side effects of the drugs. So let's try and understand what Ozempic is and what it does.
Our body produces a hormone called GLP-1 when we eat, and that does a couple things. Number one, it actually helps with blood sugar. It releases insulin, and that's why diabetics use it, and that's why it was initially approved for. But on top of that, it also delays your gastric emptying, the food that comes out of your stomach into your intestine, so it gives you that sense of being full for longer periods of time. You're not going to eat as much, and it decreases your appetite, and that's what Ozempic does. It mimics that hormone, so essentially makes you feel full, gives you less appetite, and can decrease your blood sugar as well, which is the main thing it's being used for.
Ozempic was originally approved by the FDA to treat type 2 diabetes, but soon after it was being used off-label for weight loss. Eventually, the same drug with the same active ingredients made by the same manufacturer, but with a new name, Wegovy, was approved by the FDA to treat obesity. Sounds familiar? At this point, Ozempic or Wegovy are all over social media, and tons of celebrities are rumored, if not confirmed, to be taking it, almost giving it a sense of normalcy, which I find a little concerning.
There's two kinds of drugs. There's drugs that have side effects and there's drugs that don't work.
You just do not expect to find your daughter on her knees in front of the toilet bowl, dead.
Naomi Rooney passed away in June 2022, and her mother Leonie Marget suspects that the cause was the Ozempic injections she was taking. She was told she needed to lose weight to become a mom.
Things just happened so quickly, and then it was an awful, awful tussle to wrestle her out of the toilet and to get her onto the floor to try and do CPR.
One of the issues is there's real no rhyme or reason to the side effects. We don't really have a good understanding of what they are in people who are not diabetic.
Like many drugs approved by the FDA before, there is an argument to be made that the decision might not be the most well-informed. The side effects of the drug on diabetics is something we have some understanding of, but there is no significant data on the long-term side effects of the drug when used for weight loss. But people will tell you that there are some.
Where I would hyperventilate, shake on the ground, throw up, cry in the shower.
My heart rate would constantly spike throughout the night, and it was all anxiety.
So the people who'd taken the drugs had a 50 to 75% increase in their risk of thyroid cancer.
The chemistry behind how they're losing that weight is really a starvation weight loss. This is the kind of weight loss that will decrease their immune system, decrease their bone density, decrease their muscle mass, and decrease their longevity.
All of this along with things that they even mention in the Ozempic commercial, which is awfully upbeat for the things that they're listing.
Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Gallbladder problems may occur. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes. Taking Ozempic with the sulfonylurea or insulin may increase low blood sugar risk. Side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
These side effects, along with the growing popularity of the drug in combination with the fact that people are using it for cosmetic reasons, sounds like a recipe for disaster.
And the worst part of all of it, once you stop taking it, the weight will come right back.
We need to understand that the way Ozempic is helping people lose weight is by suppressing their appetite. Now, I'm no expert, but it really just feels like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound.
You ain't used enough duct tape.
So at this point, it's not unreasonable to think that we might not fully understand how these weight loss drugs could affect us in the long run. And yeah, the drug is FDA approved, but it's hard to take their word for it when over half their funding comes from the makers of the drugs they're supposed to regulate.
There are negative side effects to the Ozempic craze that aren't necessarily medical, but possibly harmful.
We see semaglutide via Etsy. That's a problem.
Etsy? Demand for the drug has made it both pricey and hard to find, so no surprise, some people are selling Ozempic and knockoffs on the black market.
The manufacturers of drugs like Ozempic and MotionArray are not able to keep up with the demand. As a result, compounding pharmacies are making their own version of the drugs. This is common practice in times of shortage. However,
the problem that we became aware of was essentially the scale of the compounding. So compounding of semaglutide products at a very large scale, so they start now to look like a pharmaceutical company, but they're doing so without any of the checks and regulations that a large pharmaceutical company need.
this is a huge problem. The compounded versions of these drugs are not regulated by the FDA or any other governing body. So the safety or even the legitimacy of these drugs cannot be guaranteed. What makes this worse is that these compounded drugs are being sold illegally without prescriptions.
A new report by the Wall Street Journal found more than 50 websites selling semaglutide and tirzepatide, the active ingredients in diabetes drugs like Ozempic and MotionArray. While nearly all of the websites have disclaimers that the ingredients are not for human consumption, the journal found some had instructions for how people could use the substances on their own.
But if you don't want the compounded version and want to get the name brand drug, you can get a prescription just as easily.
Earlier this year, our NBC News investigation found more than a dozen telehealth websites advertising Ozempic for weight loss. I experienced firsthand just how easy it was to get these medications online at a low cost. Submit my request.
I had my Ozempic prescription by the very next day.
My producer also got a prescription.
This is Jamie.
No one ever saw us on video or in person, and neither of us has diabetes or would be medically defined as obese.
It seems like people are just as willing to hand us Ozempic as we are desperate to use it. And for the users of the drug, it often comes down to a lack of awareness to make an informed decision. But what about the people writing prescriptions, or the makers of the drug that are advertising it like it's candy? The situation we are in is a culmination of a desperate need for help to tackle the obesity crisis, and at the same time some really nefarious practices within the healthcare industry.
A new study has found that 1 in 8 of the world's population are now classed as obese. That is more than 1 billion people overall.
We've seen a massive rise in obesity across the world, and it's not necessarily a coincidence.
If you don't have access to healthy and nutritious foods that are affordable, if your community doesn't have kind of the full service grocery stores that provide those types of foods, or if you don't live in communities where physical activity is actually easy and safe.
Often, obesity is a result of an individual's lifestyle. And as easy as it is to blame them for that lifestyle, we need to recognize that it is a byproduct of their surroundings.
It's really important to understand that these are driven by long-standing inequities that we see in social and economic conditions in these communities. For example, factors such as poverty, and such as food insecurity, housing instability, having less access to quality health care, and root causes of structural racism and discrimination.
On top of this, the food industry gets to sell you some very questionable things labeled as food, and it continues to happen, but maybe that's for another day. As a result, maintaining a healthy diet these days is a very difficult task, which is then resulting in a larger number of obesity cases all around the world. And then we get these pharmaceutical companies to sell us a fix for a problem their friends created.
Adderall, Bromo Dragonfly, heroin, coke, crack, codeine, oxys, perks, Vikes, PCP, LSD, Dilaudid, mescaline,
you get
mushrooms.
the point.
Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
This is an ad released in 1998 by Purdue Pharma, the maker of Oxycontin, which was the biggest contributor to the opioid crisis in the US. And we now know that this was a complete lie. And obviously, Purdue ended up making tens of billions of dollars from Oxycontin. The opioid epidemic is a clear case of Big Pharma's greed and the FDA's failures. Misinformation through campaigns like this was what led to the demand from patients and doctors handing out prescriptions to just about everyone. Now, I'm not saying that Ozempic is addictive, but there are definitely some parallels here. When you look at the amount of money Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer of Ozempic, is making and stands to make in the future, it really puts things into perspective.
Novo Nordisk beat all estimates with $33.7 billion worth of sales last year.
A publicly traded corporation who is by design incentivized to sell more and more drugs will do exactly that. And whether that takes lobbying, quirky commercials, or a little help from their friends at the FDA, everything's on the table.
They are exaggerating the benefits of their drugs. They frequently downplay the side effects, and they create a lot of Me Too drugs, which basically are the same old drug with a new name.
The pharmaceutical industry is so rich and so powerful. Its lobbying affects Congress greatly, and also the FDA.
So maybe we need to also try to understand these things that we put in our bodies a bit more before we actually do it. But again, it's not easy to do that when these Ozempic commercials look so tempting.
Discover the Ozempic Trizone.
Ozempic.
I got the power of 3. I lowered my A1C, CV risk, and lost some weight.
But all jokes aside, as individuals operating within this system, we are trapped in a vicious cycle of unhealthy lifestyles that make us sick and then paying for drugs as treatment. Sadly, promoting a healthy lifestyle that encourages people to eat nutritious food and exercise goes against the incentives of these massive industries. So it can be hard to imagine how we could actually see some changes. But this has happened before with the tobacco industry. So I don't believe that it's all so grim. Drugs like Ozempic are being used for treating obesity, and with proper supervision, it is changing people's lives for the better. Do we need better checks and balances in place so normal people don't suffer? Absolutely. And what that would look like is an important question we should be asking ourselves and the authorities.